Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order the Bridgewater Town Council meeting. It is Tuesday, June 29th, 2021 at 7 o'clock. If I could first all ask us to stand and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On behalf of the Town Council, I'd like to extend our condolences to the family of Edgar Carlson upon his passing on June 23rd, 2021. Mr. Carlson served in the United States Marine Corps during the Korean War. I'd also like to take a brief moment of silence for all those veterans and first responders who have passed. Okay, as a reminder, this meeting is being aired live and recorded. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There'll be no in-person attendance permitted. Citizens who wish to tune into the meeting may do so via Facebook Live. I'll now move to the first item on our agenda, approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. Entertain a motion to approve from 6/8/21.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, a roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, Mr. Wood.
That was a yes, Josh.
Thank you. That was 7 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. Moving on, announcements from the president. I have just one brief announcement. I just wanted to inform the town council that we've been invited to join the 4th of July parade. As usual, expecting us to gather up in front of the Harrington building around 9:30 on the 4th. And I would certainly ask other members of the council, if you plan on participating, if you could, try to obtain a July 4th t-shirt as a charity, and that will be the dress of the morning. Hopefully we can do that in solidarity in support of the 4th of July committee and all the events on that day. Thank you very much. Moving on, C, proclamations. I have none. D, citizens open forum. I'll open that up. I would only ask that you state your name and street and keep your comments to under 3 minutes, please. Do we have any members of the citizens wishing to speak tonight? Looks like we have Ms. Domingo. Go ahead.
Good evening, councilors. I'm Beryl Domingo, Saddle Drive, Bridgewater. My comments are about the first annual Juneteenth celebration. It was an historic event a couple of weeks ago in Bridgewater that drew over 300 people, a very happy and excited crowd, and certainly people from all over Bridgewater and surrounding towns. It was a really great time. I'm a member of the planning committee, and I want to thank the town council firstly for getting on board right from the start, and also for your support and your vote on the resolution to make Juneteenth a town holiday. It's really appreciated that you also showed up. That means a lot for the Bridgewater community. Special thanks to Councilors Chase and Gallagher for the speaking at the event and for making a presentation, to Mrs. Taylor, Mrs. Johnny Taylor, with a plaque. She was just thrilled with that. So you made her day and you really made it a special occasion. In my humble opinion, the Juneteenth celebration was a huge success. I want to thank you for your part in making it so. Next year will be even better, and we hope to have your support then too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other citizens wishing to comment during citizens open forum? Josh, I don't see anyone. Just let me know if you see. Oh, Ms. Cadero.
Rebecca Fleisch-Cadero, Deerfield Drive in Bridgewater. I just wanted to briefly also address the Juneteenth celebration and mention that in addition to the town council and other people within the town, we had so many people that volunteered time, energy, a little bit of money, goods, entertainment that we had to send out. We didn't have to, but we chose to send out over 30 emails, but the emails don't reflect the number of people involved because most of the emails had multiple twos inside of them. So we were very appreciative of the support that we had all the way around. And as Mr. Mingo mentioned, how successful it was. And I just wanted the public to know how well received it was and how much it meant to so many people, which is why they donated so much. So thank you again. We had a very successful event and we look forward to doing it, as Mr. Mingo said, again next year.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other citizens for citizen open forum that wishing to speak?
Good evening, everyone. Is this open forum for the Juneteenth event, or this is just in general?
General, anything you'd like to discuss? You just have to state your name and your address.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rigobert Noel, and I am a new resident to town. I live 10 Garnett Place, Bridgewater, Mass, with my family and I. Let me just first highlight the Juneteenth event that occurred a couple of weeks ago. As a new member in town, I was highly impressed and certainly satisfied with the event that took place. I believe that the organizers did such a tremendous job putting together such a well-run event, for members of the town. And certainly I was equally satisfied identifying and witnessing the support from all walks of life. And that was, that felt good. It looked good, it felt good. And certainly I believe that my family and I had a great time. So thank you. The second thing I just want to highlight and talk about, I am the chair for the ad hoc diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that we currently have in town. Before the council tonight, there is a vote before each of you tonight with respect to funding, the DE&I training. I speak for the council, the ad hoc council members, and certainly perhaps some of them will echo what I am going to ask for. What I am asking for is certainly each of your support for this training that is before you this evening. As a member of town, I believe that it is highly important for us to recognize that equality, diversity, inclusion is something that should matter to all of us, regardless of your disposition in life, regardless of your, whatever it is that you may believe in. So I certainly believe that each one of us have a fiduciary responsibility to be inclusive in everything that we do. So as you all, I'm sure, have read, the proposal that is before you, I am asking that you guys please support it because it is the right thing to do with respect to inclusion, with respect to identifying the importance of equality, with respect to supporting something that is needed in this town for all citizens, not just those that are of color, not those that are indigenous and or those that are part of the LGBTQ committee, but all citizens of this town. So thank you so much for hearing me, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. We appreciate it. On behalf of the council, thank you for your service on that committee.
Thank
Do
you.
we have any other citizens for Citizens Open Forum wishing to speak? Josh, unless you see anyone, I don't see anyone at this time.
Do not see anyone else.
Okay, moving on. E, to appointments, we have none. Moving to hearings. First hearing, it is 7/12, petition P 2021-011, Cumberland Farms of Massachusetts Incorporated, doing business as Cumberland Farms for a change of beneficial interest and change of officer. Refer to the town manager.
Mr. President, the Cumberland Farms has reached out again and requested a continuance to your meeting on July 13th at 7:05. And they continue to work with the state to try to streamline their licensing procedure. That is the reason for the continuance.
Understood. We will move the hearing till July 13th at 7:05. Moving on to our second hearing. It is 7/13, order FY 21-051, laying of way and accepting a private way, Upland Drive and Strathmore Road. Councilor Wood. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time and ask if the petitioner is present and wishes to speak, or Councilor Wood on behalf of the petitioner.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Rob Pellegrini for the petitioner. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm here to answer your questions. I think Dave Gabriel's on the line as well.
Okay.
Yes, I am here.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. I'll first open it up and ask if there are any general questions from the public. Are there any questions from the public regarding this petition? Okay, I do not see any. I would then ask if there are any members of the public that are speaking in favor of the petition. Do not see any. Do we have any members of the public speaking in opposition? Any members of the public speaking in opposition?
Hey, good evening. This is Kenneth O'Neill, 5 Strathmore Road.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Neill.
And I had my hand up earlier. I apologize. I had a question for the town. Did we have a engineer or anyone with level of expertise around roads come and look at it? I'd love to get their perspective before I weigh in.
I'll defer to the town manager. I know there was a report with our DPW commissioner.
Correct. The town engineer did inspect the roadways and did find them in satisfactory condition. He did that in conjunction with the water and sewer superintendent, and also the highway superintendent, roadway superintendent. So correct.
Mr. O'Neill, any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
This is Ross Becker from 3 Strathmore Road. How are you?
Good. Is it Ross Becker?
Correct.
Go ahead, Mr. Becker.
Just quick question. I had emailed with Mr. Gabriel's attorney over the last couple of days. the sidewalks seem to be needing a lot of work still, and the attorney from Mr. Gabriel had mentioned that that would be done in the next coming days. So just wanted to make sure that was addressed on this call.
So I can jump in on that if you'd like.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, we have been emailing with that neighbor, and he's sent us some pictures as well. They're in the grand scheme, fairly minor, but they are going to be addressed beginning tomorrow, and it's certainly something that could be addressed when we come back for release of the bond.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other members of the public speaking in opposition to the petition? Okay, I'll move on to any questions from council. Any members of the town council have any questions for the petitioner or the town manager? Okay, I see none. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing. It is 7:17 and would entertain a motion from the council to approve.
I'll make a
So
motion
moved.
to approve.
Oh. I'll second.
Okay, I have Councilor George and I missed the second. Was it Councilor Gallagher?
No, it's
No.
Counselor Wood on the first and George on the second.
Okay, understood. Any other comments, Councilor Wood?
Yeah, just a couple brief comments. This road is in my precinct. It's an area that I and my family walk frequently, and we knew there were a couple items, and Mr. Gabriel worked with the DPW as the town manager, talked about there were a number of items that they needed to clear up, and they did that successfully. Actually, when you walk the streets, and the first time I walked the street and found out it hadn't been accepted yet, it's one of our better streets in town. If you look at the condition of a lot of other streets. So you can also see that the planning board unanimously voted to approve the acceptance. And I know at least one planning board member took a ride up there to take a look at the street condition as well. So you heard the attorney say that the sidewalk defect would be fixed in the next day or so. So hopefully this will be a unanimous approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor George?
Nope, all set.
Okay, any other councilors? Okay, I only echo the sentiments of Councilor Wood. The Gabriel family and the developer, have done an outstanding job in a number of communities in the town of Bridgewater for many, many years. I'm happy to see this coming to a vote and would ask for your support. As Councilor Wood mentioned, on 5/26/21, the planning board did vote unanimously to recommend this acceptance. So with all that, I will move to a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. Moving on, license transactions, petition P
Thank you.
2021. You're welcome. P 2021-013, the granting of a one-day alcohol and one-day entertainment permit, Black Hat Brew Works. I'll defer to the town manager.
Mr. President, this is not two successive Fridays, but 2 Fridays in July 2nd, July 23rd, from 3 to 9:30 p.m. These are one-day alcohol licenses, which by policy, the council has deferred approval to the town manager. However, when we have a one-day alcohol coupled with an entertainment, we bring that back to the council for approval. So that is in front of you this evening. We have no objection.
Excellent. Thank you. Motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any questions from the council? Okay, seeing none, move for a roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. Moving on. H, presentations, Charter Review Committee, final recommendations. We have before us tonight Ed Ovaldi, who's graciously offered to come before us and give us a presentation on all of the work that's been occurring with the Charter Review Committee. I would ask that all of us collectively as counselors allow Ed to get through his presentation. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions when he's done. Mr. Ovaldi, if you're all set, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. Josh, do I have screen sharing ability?
Yes, you're all set.
All right, let me share my screen. Hopefully you can all see it.
Looks good.
All right. So it's a privilege to be here tonight with several other members of the Charter Review Committee to deliver to you our recommendations to Bridgewater's charter. If possible, I'd like to recognize a couple of members who I believe are on tonight. Janet Hansen is on, and I think Tom Golden are both on from what I could tell earlier. So thank you guys for joining as well. This past year has certainly gone by quickly, and if I may say on behalf of the committee, it certainly has been an enlightening and rewarding experience for all of us. The presentation will last approximately 30 to 40 minutes. We'll open it up for some dialogue at the end. I'd ask that you please hold any questions or comments to the end so that we don't get bogged down and go over our allotted time. As for the agenda, it's pretty simple. I'll share a little bit about where we've been over the last year, remind you of how we approached our work, and then dive into the recommendations. To set the stage, I do want to tell you up front that our presentation today does not include every single detailed recommendation. For that, you'll have to read the updated charter, which I believe you should all have a copy of, and that is also posted on our committee's website. Because of time, what we want to do now is highlight many of our key recommendations. And then to wrap up at the end, we'll talk briefly about some implementation options for rollout, as well as some next steps. So let's begin with some background. In terms of background, we were formed in May of last year. The committee has pretty much stayed the same throughout the entire year, although we did have one resignation early on, which was quickly filled by the council. We met at least twice a month, in several cases 3 times during the month, totaling up to 32 meetings held over the course of the past year. You can see the committee members listed here. So the first 3 months, we really focused on organizing ourselves, setting expectations, gathering and reviewing prior charter review data, planning and establishing a schedule to help guide our efforts. From September through November, the committee focused on developing and distributing a citizen survey and an employee questionnaire. We also conducted 3 public forums to solicit additional feedback from the public. For the final phase, beginning this past December, we conducted an in-depth review of the charter, held another set of public forums to gather additional feedback, and then discussed and voted on potential recommendations. In terms of scoping our efforts and trying not to reinvent the wheel, we made a decision early on that we would not start with a blank sheet of paper, but would try and utilize the prior work of the 2014 Charter Review Committee, as well as the 2017 Town Council Rules and Procedures Committee's work. This gave us a good baseline from which to start and saved us a lot of additional time and effort. We also realized that much of the original 2010 charter has really served us well over the past decade, so we wanted to ensure that we kept what was working well, but focused on those areas of government that could use some improvement. As already mentioned, getting input from the community and employees was key in helping us identify those potential areas of improvement. So we'll begin to look at the recommendations, and we've sort of categorized those into 2 groups. The first being those that are general in nature, meaning that they occur throughout the entire charter, and then those that are specific to articles. So this slide here, we'll go through and just talk about some of the general recommendations. The first one is that we added a table of contents, which the current charter does not have. And it makes it much easier for someone coming in and being able to navigate or go to a specific area of the charter without having to flip through it. We also added some new definitions as well as clarified many of the existing definitions. There were some that were very ambiguous, and we just needed to improve the readability of these definitions. Next, we decided to go through the entire charter and update it to gender neutral language. And what this meant really was avoiding any word choices in the charter, which may be interpreted as being biased, discriminatory, or demeaning. The next item here was we decided to bring the charter up to date with its stated form of government. Section 1.1 of the charter says the following: the city of Bridgewater shall constitutionally have a city form of government. So structurally, we are a city, even though we don't currently call ourselves a city. But we thought that it was worth going through the charter and updating it to reflect that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that if all the references to town become city, that we have to publicly call ourselves a city. I mean, as far as the signage in the town, we can still refer to ourselves externally as a town. We just felt it was the right time to make sure that the charter was consistent throughout. The next thing we did was we updated all the references to Mass General Law to be consistent. There were many references and they were all done differently. So we wanted to make sure that they were consistent in the format and how those were being referenced. The next item was to look at how to standardize the computation of time. There are several areas in the charter where time is calculated differently, and so we standardized that so it's consistent. There was a lot of general grammatical updates, errors that corrected, and just overall readability to make it easier to read for the general public. And last but not least, we're recommending that in the future, somehow we utilize hyperlinks for any sort of supporting documentation or reference material that is mentioned in the charter. However, due to potential maintenance challenges, because we know the charter doesn't change that often, and potentially hyperlinks could, which we haven't quite figured out how to do that. So we think that is something that is going to need to be continually discussed and figure out, how to implement something like that just to help in the future to access that information. So now we'll get into the article-specific recommendations, starting with Article 1, which is the incorporation and authority article. First thing we did here was we removed the definitions, which used to be embedded in Article 1, to the beginning of the charter for use as a separate reference section, rather than have them embedded.
Want to sit on the chair?
Rather than have them embedded in the article. We also updated section 2-1B, which is titled a short title, and we changed the home rule charter to special act charter. And the reason we did this was because our original charter did not go through Article 89 of the state constitution, which is the home rule amendment. We went through the special act process, and therefore any additional updates to the charter have to go through that process. So we really have a special act charter, not a home rule charter. So other than those two changes, that was all we did to Article 1. Article 2, legislative branch. Section 2.1b, we adjusted some language to clarify how vacancies are filled within the council. Section 2.1c, we minimized the lame duck period from when a councilor gets elected to when they actually take office. Right now, the charter says it begins on the second Monday following the election. We changed it to the next business day following the election. Section 2.1d, entitled prohibitions, we added that for clarity. We also added a prohibition for when a councilor is convicted of a state ethics law violation. There's currently one in there for a criminal offense, but there's nothing in there for anyone being convicted of a state ethics law violation. We thought that was important to add. And last but not least, section 2.1e here on this slide, term limits. We kept term limits in because of the citizen feedback that we received. However, we modified it quite a bit. Instead of using time, meaning years, as the term or the unit of measure, what we did here is we said it has to do with the number of times you're either elected or appointed. to the city council. So the tenure we're recommending is the tenure cannot exceed 4 elections or appointments to the city council. So that would essentially still be 12 years because we have a 3-year term and each election would be for 1 term. However, we expanded it to say that if, for example, a district councilor hit their limit, they could then run for an at-large position and essentially get elected for another four terms. So we've expanded from 4 terms to 8 terms, or a total of 24 years for a term limit. Still staying with Article 2, Section 2-3C5, the committee felt it was important to set a specific date for the yearly State of the Town message. And so we're saying it should be held annually before March 15th. We also clarified in 2.5C and D the appointment process and added a paragraph dealing with a situation where an incumbent is reelected by a write-in. That is currently not addressed in the charter. It could very well happen. In fact, it may have already happened and we just didn't, it's not addressed in the charter. So that's in there now. Sections 2.6C, 7, and 14, we made changes to improve the accessibility to government by citizens, as well as improving communication between the council and citizens, thus providing better accountability of councilors to their constituents. Again, Article 2, Section 2.7A, we reverted back to the original charter language of 30 days to provide citizens or aggrieved parties the opportunity to object during enacting a measure. The Rules and Procedure Committee from 2017, and I believe the Charter Review Committee had also felt that 72 hours was appropriate, but we felt that was too short of a time, so we reverted back to the original 30 days. As for posting legal notices, we felt that newspaper postings are ineffective and extremely expensive. So we replaced that with posting on the town website, also adhering to posting requirements of state law and any other posting requirements as decided by the town council or the city council. And last but not least, Section 2-12A, the committee has agreed that a small stipend is certainly appropriate for council members as they have demonstrated leadership in restoring and continuously improving the financial picture of our town. As a side benefit, the stipend may also be a way to attract and retain council members. Although the stipend is on the very low end of the scale compared to other municipalities that do offer stipends, we feel that it's something that is warranted now for our council. Okay, moving on to Article 3, which is elected officials. So in Section 3.1, our main goal here was to make it as open as possible to enhanced engagements without violating any conflict of interest laws or standards. So as a result, we've allowed employees to be eligible for non-council elected or appointed positions. However, the stipulation there is they must be annually approved by the council and reviewed by the city attorney for any potential conflicts. Right now, they are prohibited from holding any of those positions. Section 3.2, we did quite a lot of changes working with the library trustees to expand the scope of the trustees' domain. We're specifically addressing how to manage assets such as collections and gifts. And we provided a lot more detail on how the library director position is actually filled. So this went back and forth several times. We've had several meetings with them, and we feel very comfortable now with the updates to this section. Section 3.3 is a new recall provision, which is being added. However, we did make some changes to the original submission that came forward. We've essentially reduced the number of voters required to file for an at-large recall from 500 down to 400. But we've pretty much adopted the language that was provided by the 2017 Rules and Procedures Committee, with some minor grammatical changes. And then Section 3.4, the city clerk, we Spent a lot of time discussing this one. We spoke to many different folks who had gathered the feedback from the survey as such, the public forums. The city clerk actually came to our group and spoke to the value of it staying elected versus being appointed. And so we did vote on it. I believe the vote was 5-2 as the committee to keep it as an elected position. All right, moving on to Article 4, Town Manager. Section 4.1, what we did here was we really wanted to clarify the relationship between the city council and the city manager to reflect that we have the proper checks and balances in place between the council and the city manager. So there's been verbiage added to reflect that. We've also added a term to the town manager position. Essentially, it's a maximum 5-year renewable term. Just like any other appointed position in our town, which is have terms, we felt this was important to have. And the point here is that the city manager serves at the will of the council and is bound by whatever legislative policy action the city council takes. Section 4.2A9, this is really to establish a better connection across the board in terms of planning, long-term planning goals for the city. We wanted to make it easier for citizens' voices to get heard beyond the 3-minute, citizens forum that we have at the meetings. We wanted to make sure that there's an ongoing, regular 2-way effective communication going on in multiple formats between the town manager, the council, and citizens. And the requirement that we put in under section 2-A26 is to conduct no less than quarterly informational sessions with departments and community-based organizations to promote continuous collaboration. And last but not least, on the town manager, section 4.7, this slide is pretty much self-explanatory in that we clarified how a temporary absence of the city manager is handled. That was somewhat vague in the current charter, so we clarified that. Article 5, which is administrative organizations. The only key change that we're recommending here is how the city attorney is appointed. Currently, the attorney is appointed by the manager. So this change is being recommended by us because the city attorney represents the city as a whole. And as a representative of the citizens, the council majority gives direction on behalf of the city. So we're saying that we think the city attorney needs to be appointed by the city council. And we're also suggesting that it be similar to the town manager, a 5-year renewable term. I just want to mention that this recommendation aligns with other municipalities in the way they appoint their city solicitor or city attorneys. Many of them are appointed by the city or town councils. Okay, moving on to financial management. Section 6.3, budget to actual assessments. This paragraph is contained in the current charter. The 2014 CRC updated it, but it was removed by the 2017 Town Council Rules and Procedures Committee. We believe it's important to have a mid-year review of the budget to ensure transparency on actuals versus budgeted expenses. So we're putting it back in, and we think that it makes sense to do that. 6.6B3, we've added a statement that requires the identification of currently approved projects and their status. The idea here is to separate currently approved projects from new projects so it's clear what's already been funded, what hasn't been funded, and to give their status. And then as far as the annual audit, section 6.8.2, we've reverted back to the content of the original charter, which gives the council responsibility for selecting the independent auditor. This change was made because we want the annual audit to be truly independent. We felt that the council, being one step removed from the day-to-day operations, would give a broader view of their scope of the audit. And to that point, we believe the direction given to the auditor needs to come from the council and not the manager. Next, Article 7, elections and related matters. We made no significant changes here, just some minor clarifications and wordsmithing. Article 8, citizens participation mechanisms. What we did here on section 8.1b is we specified a time frame for the city clerk to hand off a petition to the city attorney. That's within 1 business day after the submission. We've also increased the petition time from 10 to 30 days, which gives citizens more time to initiate a protest on a particular measure. And then lastly here, we've added an email distribution to reflect more, current type of communication to the petitioners rather than having to use snail mail. Article 9, general provisions. 9.1a, we spent some time clarifying and restructuring to make it easy to read. A lot of the original charter had sentences that were run-on sentences that were just really difficult to understand, so we broke things up. There was no content change here, however, to this section. Section 9.6, computation of time. We added here the statement that the first day shall begin at 12 a.m. the day following the triggering event, because there was nothing there that talked about when the clock actually started. So this addresses that. 9.7, we eliminated some confusion by breaking the removal process into 2 separate processes, because there are appointments to multiple member bodies that are done by the council, and there are some that are done by the city manager. So there are essentially 2 separate processes depending on who does the appointment. Last but not least, in Article 9, we added a new section, section 9.9, and this was based on feedback that we received, again, through our survey and through the public forums, and just general perceptions that it's unclear who is responsible for ensuring adherence to the charter. So this section talks about the fact that it's the responsibility of all elected officials to ensure the enforcement of and compliance with this charter. And any allegations of misdoing or not a violation of the charter would be referred to the city council president for addressing those allegations. Okay, and last but not least, Article 10. Since most of Article 10 in the current charter was concerned with the transition to the new form of government back in 2010, most of it was not relevant going forward, not applicable. So we removed most of this article. And since we're not recommending that the town clerk be appointed, there was specific verbiage in there that was added by the 2017 Rules and Procedures Committee that addressed the appointment of the town clerk. That has also been removed. So essentially, there's only this one statement in section 10.1 that talks about this charter becoming fully effective upon ratification by the voters. Okay, so that takes us to the following question. How can we ensure a successful rollout of these recommendations? And there really are 2 aspects to answering this question. The first is how the recommendations are packaged, and the second is timing. As we all know, the previous process after leaving the Charter Review Committee took approximately 4 years before getting to the voters in 2019. And then once it got to the voters, it was packaged all or nothing, and it ultimately failed at the ballot box. So there is room for improvement on both fronts. So the approach that we are recommending this time includes having a series of questions on the ballot that gives voters more choices without sacrificing the whole charter review. So what we're suggesting is bundling all of the non-contentious sort of general recommendations into a single question, and then having a separate individual question for each of the more controversial items. And we've kind of listed some of what our thoughts are for these. So the non-controversial ones would be the ones listed here. Pretty simple. The controversial ones, I mean, perhaps the term limits, the stipend, and maybe even the town to city references could be considered controversial, but the council is going to need to decide that. So there is no technical limit as to the number of questions possible on the ballot. However, obviously less is better to keep things clear and simple for voters. Using this approach will increase the likelihood of the recommendations passing. So in terms of what happens next, obviously there are several steps listed on this slide, most of which you as the council have control over. The two major deliverables include the charter itself and then the special act, which would include the ballot questions. Although we as a committee clearly understand that you may have every right to disagree with our recommendations, our hope is that you make every effort to understand and ultimately adopt most, if not all, of what we have suggested. Once everything is ready to send off to the state legislature, it will be critically important to engage our state reps, Angelo D'Amelia and Mark Pacheco, to help usher it through the state approval process. From our perspective, this effort should be treated like any other project, with a defined timeline and management oversight to ensure that it moves along swiftly. Remember, the first time we went through this process back in 2009, 2010, the charter was actually approved in December of 2009, and then it went before the voters in April of 2010, 4 months later. So it only took 4 months from the time that it was approved by town meeting to go through a legal review, to be submitted to the legislature, and to come back and get on the ballot in April. So we're not suggesting that it should be done that quickly this time around, but presenting it to the voters next April is certainly doable. Obviously, it's a question of priority, and we know that the council is dealing with a lot of different things these days, but if this becomes a priority, it's definitely doable. So that concludes our presentation. We do want to thank you again as a committee for the opportunity that you've entrusted to us over the past year. Moving forward, we will do our best to be available to assist the council with any further guidance as needed. We're assuming that it will perhaps go to the Rules and Procedure Committee again, like it did last time, for further review. And so we'll make ourselves available to help in any way that we can. So I'm going to stop sharing and send it back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ed. We certainly appreciate all of the effort and time by yourself and the other members of the Charter Review Committee have put into this quite extensive review of the charter. So what I'd like to do is just open it up to other members of the council and see if there's any questions or major themes that they want to just bring to your attention briefly. And certainly we'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss some of the more controversial changes of the charter down the road. But I'll go ahead and start with Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ed Evaldi, and thank you, committee, for the work you did over these last several months. I appreciate the effort. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to hone in on just 3 because I know it'll go to committee and we'll have further discussions. On the election piece, you had no specific recommendations. Did the committee ever give any thought to reducing the signatures required for nomination papers at all? Was that discussed?
Yes, it was discussed, and I believe we did change those. That just wasn't considered a key recommendation, so it wasn't. I didn't present that.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
And the other one that relates to the city manager and the city attorney, when you say maximum 5-year renewable term, are you saying that they're limited to how long they can work for the town? Is that what that means?
No, what we're saying is that at least, if not sooner than 5 years, at least on a 5-year cycle, the position needs to be reviewed, formally reviewed, for reappointment, rehiring, or whatever. Right now, that does not happen necessarily. It may happen, it may not happen, but we feel it should be something that is explicit in the charter for both of those positions.
Okay, but they can get renewed.
Oh, it's renewable. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you again for your work. Yep.
Thanks, Dennis.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilor George.
Thank you, Mr. President. but Councilor Gallagher beat me to the punch. So the only question I had was the 5-year renewable term, and Ed, you answered it perfectly. So, but I'll say thank you very much for all of the work that you and the Charter Review Committee have done putting this all together. So thank you very much.
Yeah, all right. Just a quick note, I do also want to thank Carlton specifically as the former chair of the prior CRC for he helped us tremendously, and many other folks that chimed in and gave us support over the year. Yeah.
See, any other members of town council with any questions? Councilor Wood.
Thank you. Ed, thank you, and the committee for putting in the effort. I know with that many meetings and that much detail, that's an awful lot of work. I wish I could have helped you, but you know, I asked a couple times and didn't get a chance. You mentioned a survey. So I know there was an early survey. I think there were only about 140 response on the survey. Did you run a second survey? Am I right with the number?
You're close. I think it was 137 around that. No, we just did the one survey.
All right. So don't you think that 137 is too small a sample to really get a measure of what the public thinks?
It was what it was, Bill. So we took that, we took the responses and we used that in our discussions.
All right. The last committee met with the town attorney as part of the cycle. Did you meet with the town attorney during this process?
We did not.
Okay.
We had early discussions with him, and the decision was that, you know, that would probably happen within the council when the council had the charter.
Yeah. And then I know you were a huge proponent of the appointed town clerk. You know, that was in your original work. I think you and I had some discussions about that.
Yep.
And yet you decided to leave it elected, and you didn't put any term limits on the town clerk. Why was that?
It's an elected position.
So all elected positions should not have term limits?
No.
Okay.
So, and I told you there was a 5-2 vote on that. So the majority of the committee thought it should stay elected. I feel it should be appointed, but I was one of the voters who lost that one.
All right. So if I can spend just a couple questions and I'll be done on the term limit section. So the current language models the language that you had talked with Pete Columbatis back in May of 2020, before the committee got organized, you know, the four elections. And that was after the so-called Bill Wood situation, when you talked to the rest of the council about the Bill Wood situation, which I still don't know what you meant by Bill Wood situation. Maybe you can explain that while you work on this answer. But so in the language as it's presented tonight, with appointed or elected being the same, and using Councillor Chase, if he doesn't mind, as an example. So he was an appointment for a partial year, I believe, and then he was a 1-year elected, and then he was a 3-year elected, and next year he'll be up for election again. So are you saying that that's it for District 4, that they can't re-elect Fred anymore after that, even if they want to?
If he is elected or appointed for a total of 4 times, that's it.
So even though he's used up 4,
but he can then run at large. Years. He can then run at large if he chooses to do that.
Okay, if he wants to. I don't know if he wants to. All right, so can we go back to whatever the Bill Wood situation was? Can you explain to the group what that was and why you felt that was so important to talk about?
I don't think it's appropriate to talk about that right now. There was nothing in the presentation about that. I mean, I don't see any value in discussing that right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd like to move on. I don't want to be beating up the chair of the Charter Review Committee in this forum right now. So unless there's something more generalized for the review committee, let's move on.
If there are no other questions, is it appropriate to make a motion to dissolve the committee?
There's no need to dissolve it because our terms have expired.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member of the council with any questions or comments? Councilor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question actually on the use of city and town. I know that's a bigger topic, not for today, but maybe one of the concerns I have is if we're known publicly as town councilors, but in the documents for city councilors, when somebody goes to the website and searches, they won't find anything about the rules that govern us. So I'm just sort of concerned about, you know, sort of like a familiar term that doesn't match kind of the information people can find online. And I was just curious, were there discussions about, you know, potential communication challenges with having sort of like these two labels over our elected officials?
Yeah, good question, Eric. We did have a lot of discussion about this one in particular. So, you know, I think we're at a crossroads here as a town. I mean, we are growing, we continue to grow. We are structurally a city in terms of our form of government. So, you know, I think it's worth the discussion to say, do we at some point, whether it's now or some point in the future, you know, accept the fact that, you know, we're not a small town anymore. You know, and that I think there's perceptions that people have of cities, and whether it's crime or whether it's other things that, you know, people have these perceptions of, but there are a lot of cities that, you know, don't have the negative sort of perceptions around it. So I think as a council, yeah, that's going to have to be discussed more. But again, we felt that it was time, after 10 years, it was time to make sure the charter reflected the true nature of our structure.
Councilor Moore, you all set?
I am, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Columbotus?
Yeah, I guess I have a little trouble with our aversion to the use of the word city. I mean, what are we implying here? That cities are big, bad, evil places that we should avoid being identified with? I find it pretty offensive personally. So I just want to add that.
Okay, thank you. Any other councils?
Yeah, Mr. President, just one other thing is that we're going to be looking at redistricting. So there's going to be some changes within our titles regardless. And I'm pretty confident that the townspeople will be able to adopt from, you know, town councilor to city councilor to, you know, district councilor, whatever the case may be. I don't think that's going to cause any type of confusion. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you.
One question.
Councilor Gallagher.
Just one, since we're wrapping up, Mr. President, is it appropriate to make a motion to refer this to rules and procedures, or does it need to come back in an order or resolution format?
The latter is my understanding, Councilor Gallagher, that the only real motivation tonight was to present the findings to the council, and then we'll have to do something with it. And certainly to Mr. Alvaldi's point, I'd like to see it move quicker, you know, at least get things moving on our end. And it looks like Council Wood has something to add.
I would also just to weigh in on the procedural elements of it. I think that's accurate. What Mr. Rushton's indicating, that some councilor will have to move pieces or the entirety forward as some sort of formal charter change, right? And then it will work its way through the process. But I'll leave it up to you all how you do that and what portions you bring forward, which you don't, or all, or whatever. But it has to come through that process.
Thank you. Councilor Wood, do you have something to add?
Yeah, you know, the other night we had a workshop for the council. We discussed this very subject. So this is a big item. It's a strategic item, and it's an item that maybe, you know, we should do a workshop first and then assign it to a committee for detailed work.
Councilor Wood took the thoughts right from me. That's sort of where I was going. I thought, you know, our retreat with the town manager was an excellent platform, and we learned quite a bit about how to navigate some of these larger policy issues for the town. So I think we need to get all the councils in the same room on one particular subject and work through that with the Charter Review Committee. And I'm hopeful that that is the process that moves this forward and brings it back to the town council collectively, with a thought process about what we want to move forward and don't. Okay, I guess we're seeing no other comments. Ed, again, I can't thank you enough for the commitment and time and effort for all of the members of the committee. It's an enormous undertaking and not something that's very exciting. So, certainly appreciate that, and certainly the time. I see several of the committee members on the Zoom meeting tonight, and I appreciate the time coming out and informing the council of some of the recommended changes that you've made them. Certainly looking forward to keeping the ball rolling. I certainly don't want to see all of the hard work fall flat on its face and nothing happen. So that is my intention as president, and you'll see some action on that soon. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, town manager report. First item is the Mitchell School update.
Mr. President, I have pretty good news all around with this update this evening. So work continues on the Mitchell. Steel continues to go up and the site work continues all as planned. The project team, just so folks know, and it's more an example of how they're trying to accommodate any concerns that the neighbors have around the Mitchell School. But as an example, the project team has required staging of deliveries away from the actual site. So they've requested that any deliveries get staged depending on what side of town they're coming in on off of Route 24 or off of Route 104 until the site is ready to accept delivery of whatever materials are coming in. So that's a good kind of a good move initiated by the project team that we've employed. So I do appreciate that. I think the neighbors appreciate that as well. Draft budget continues to be in draft form. They're working off of that budget, and we are still awaiting MSB confirmation and approval of that draft budget. And it appears that the delay at the MSBA level is more related to staff shortages and not really anything to do with any particular issue they have with our budget. So we did meet with MSBA last week, I believe it was, and that's the message that we got from them. So otherwise, the timeline is still good. Projected completion date of July of 2022, just about a year away. The next meeting of the school building committee is Monday, July 12th at 6:30 p.m. And anybody can log on to Zoom and see what's going on there, or you can go to bridgewaterschoolproject.com. And if nothing else, by the end of this project, I will have memorized bridgewaterschoolproject.com. Will be firmly ingrained in my memory. But that's what I have for the Mitchell School, but happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Any questions from any members of the council for the town manager? I do not see any, but I see Councilor Fitzgibbons is on, and I would just ask, and he'll be pleased to hear any update on the financial calculator for the town related to the project.
I will say that we are ready to go with the calculator, and in honor of former counselor, current school board member Tim Fitzgibbons, we will make sure that as soon as that budget is approved by the MSBA, we'll have that calculator up on our website.
Excellent. And I did see, at least for any citizens watching tonight, there's an early start on the project tomorrow morning due to the heat.
I appreciate that. I had not gotten that word, but I do appreciate that.
Okay, moving on. Next item B, COVID-19 update.
Very happy to report for the first time in well over a year that we have no reported active cases of COVID in Bridgewater at this time. That obviously doesn't mean that there isn't any COVID case, but it does mean that we have no reported active case. So that is good news. In terms of Bridgewater residents who have been vaccinated, the state data as of last Thursday show 50%, roughly 50% have been fully vaccinated, and another 5% have had the first round. So a total of 55% have had at least one shot. 50% have had two. So that is good news too. But happy to answer any COVID questions.
Any questions for the town manager or any town councilor? Okay, seeing none. I just had a brief couple of follow-ups. Could you speak on the COVID vaccination clinic at BSU? Is that shutting down at this point? Is it shut down?
I have not had a conversation with BSU on that specific issue. I know that that they had been up and going and did not require any appointment whatsoever. You could just walk in at any time during the regular business hours and get a vaccine. But I have not heard not heard whether the state has closed that down. We do appear to be a community that's slightly lagging in terms of total percentages of vaccinated residents. So certainly, I think it would behoove the state to maintain that center, but I have not heard anything as of today, at least.
Okay, thank you. That was sort of my follow-up to that. Was we're looking at potentially around 55% vaccinated. I was just curious if you had how we fare with the state average, and so you're saying we're slightly below.
Actually, the state average is about where we are, if memory serves. We are a little bit below some of our South Shore communities, and we're right about in the mix with other communities around us, such as West Bridgewater, Middleborough, Halifax, all in that sort of 50%, 50 to 55% range. As you head over to some other communities, I did notice it stuck out actually, and I've got it right here. I think Duxbury was somewhere in the 78% range. Just as an example, Carver is 56, East Bridgewater is 58, and so forth. So won't belabor it going down the list, but we lag a little bit behind, but certainly I would encourage folks that are so inclined to go take advantage of BSU as long as that site is open.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on.
Mr. President,
sorry, Councilor George.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up question to the town manager through you. So Mr. Dutton, do we have a sense of the percentages that are vaccinated in our senior housing? And this is more of a difficult term, but people that are challenged to get to a vaccination site in town. And the reason I asked that question is, do we still have the capability of sending people to the sites? I know we had something at the senior center, but for people that don't have the mobility that are desiring a vaccination, do we still have that ability to get them their shots?
We absolutely do. One of the stipulations that BSU actually, before they were designated, one of the things that they required was the ability to make sure that the participating towns were able to get vaccinations or vaccine to distribute to homebound, anybody homebound. So our fire department, our paramedics have done an exceptional job making sure that that seniors and others who may be homebound have gotten the appropriate vaccinations, and they followed up, again with a follow-up vaccine, second shot after the 2-week period. So that does still exist. If there's anybody out there who needs that kind of service, then feel free to reach out to our fire department, and they will take your information, or the health agent, the health department. Either will take your name and number and get back to you very quickly to make sure that you can get that service. So we do offer that. And the other participating towns in our area are also doing the same thing. So good question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Councilor Souza.
Through you to the town manager. The transportation system that's set up at the senior center through Bill's Taxi, weren't they offering the similar service where it will take you to and back? Because they take them to doctor's appointments in every other place where they can't get to. So wouldn't that apply to getting the vaccine?
Absolutely. That's Councilor Sousa brings up a really excellent point that I have not highlighted. We were the recipient of a sizable grant, which was specifically designed to help those that were challenged with lack of transportation during the COVID pandemic and ongoing, and to get those folks to places they needed to go, whether it be doctor's appointments, quite honestly, the grocery store, but certainly getting the vaccine is also a perfectly valid use of that service. So it's a free service. It's funded through a state grant, and the senior center can coordinate that directly. So if there are folks out there that need a ride to get to the vaccination site, or feel more comfortable getting to the vaccination site, then absolutely, Senior Center will help spearhead that. And you don't have to be a senior to use it. If you need that service, then they can spearhead that for you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on. C, McElwain School update.
What you see is what you get. I'm happy to report that transaction did close a couple of weeks ago. The McElwain ownership of the McElwain changed hands, and the development team has taken ownership of that. And I think as anybody that's gone down Main Street recently has seen, work has started. They are starting out with site work and also hazardous material abatement, and that work has begun. The site obviously has been fenced. That will be roughly 18 months, I think, is their construction projection. So we're looking at about 57 units of housing in a restored or rather renovated McElwain School, and an additional building in the back. And that will be fairly attractive when it's all said and done, fairly attractive housing. It does have a public use component. There's a meeting room that will be available for public use in the new building, and there will also be an outdoor play area that's available for public use as well. So that's great for that location and that area of town, and certainly a great use of an old historic building. So that work is underway, and they do, the developers have committed to sort of a fall, can't really call it groundbreaking, but I guess it's somewhat of a groundbreaking and check presentation event. So we look forward to that, and we look forward to folks coming down from Boston, coming down from DHCD, who are actually quite excited about this project. It's in many cases, in many different ways, it's sort of a first, certainly a first for Bridgewater, and it's certainly a first for DHCD and some of their funding mechanisms. So they're kind of excited about this particular project. So we're looking forward to quality development going in there. But that's really all I had on that. I'm certainly happy to answer questions.
Councilor Wood.
Just a couple questions. So through you to town manager. So the building to the left of the school, is that going to be retained, or is that something else in the project?
That building is the development team bought that soon after they committed to purchasing the McElwain, and that will be renovated. They're not doing significant renovations. I think they're sort of reconfiguring, some of the inside walls. But otherwise, that'll become sort of part of that total sort of campus, housing campus.
Okay, and then I know when they did the presentation a couple of years ago, they talked about the town council or another body in Bridgewater becoming involved in selecting the residents' qualifications, because it's a affordable living situation, and we can define like preference to residents or something else. Can you speak to what's happening with that?
It's a little premature at this stage, but we do have secured I guess a resident preference, so that residents of Bridgewater who qualify have sort of a better chance of getting housing in that location. And you're correct, Councilor Wood's correct. They will reach out to the council to sort of develop policies and rules around the selection and some of the criteria, to the extent that it can be decided on a local level. But there is a what's referred to as a local preference in that regard. But I would suspect that within the next probably 8 months, they'll be coming to us to look to develop that plan.
Any other councilors?
Mr. President, through you to the town manager.
Council George.
Thank you. Two things. One, so the transaction has been completed, so the listing agent sign can come down. That does not, unless they want to pay us a nice monthly fee to advertise on a high traffic place, they can take that down. But also in the same note too, I'd like to see the developer as quickly as possible put on the fence a rendering of the project when it's completed, so that, people that are walking by, maybe not so much driving by, but walking by, can take a look at it and get a sense for what the final project's going to look like, to give everyone a better idea of what ultimately we're going to benefit from when that's completed.
Excellent point. I will reach out to them. I do believe that's a requirement of one of the many different sources of funding that they're getting. So I will check on that. They're also the beneficiaries of community preservation funds, and they should be hanging a notice of that as well on the fence. So I'll follow up with them on that. Happy Councilor George will be happy to know I drove by today, and just as they were taking that sign out of the ground, so that sign is down.
About time.
Excellent. Any other comments? I would only add, Michael, extremely pleased to see this project finally happening. The amount of years that school has remained closed and abandoned, and the fact that we're able to preserve that building with a nice addition on the back, and also provide housing for people who will be able to come downtown and use the businesses downtown on foot without traffic. I think it's really going to be an excellent addition, and also helps to improve the environment around our housing authority and many of our seniors that live right there, to have some additional housing and space that they can enjoy as well. So I'm very pleased to see it happening, and thank you for your hard work and seeing this through, because I know it's taken many of grants and numbers, proposal and financial packages to make this happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, D, enforcement of ordinance D FY 18-012 vacant and abandoned properties.
So I'll give a little bit of update here, and I think this is an area where, quite frankly, I think we can do a better job. Obviously, we've got at least perceived issues on Broad Street and Summer Street with properties that have the appearance of being abandoned or vacant. We have sort of set aside some of our more stringent enforcement during the COVID year plus, but quite honestly, prior to that, we were working with both owners of these two particular properties, or multiple properties, to try to resolve some of the issues there. I don't know that we are going to resolve the building issues or redevelopment issues that are associated with either of those particular properties. So I will be meeting with our development internal team to try to develop a strategy by which we can enforce what we need to enforce there. I would ask the council to keep in mind that, the enforcement mechanism that we have, which I think is better than what we had 6 years ago. But those enforcement mechanisms are very time consuming. We're in a period of time where, building has been kind of out of control to some extent. So we do need to carve out the time, and we will need to enforce what we have on the books. And we'll do that certainly initially with guidance from Attorney Rollins, because I think we would certainly, in response to an enforcement, we would expect some litigation. So we will go cautiously there, but we will be starting to enforce the vacant and abandoned properties ordinance. So I am happy to answer questions about that, but I think that's our plan at this point.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Councilor
just
Gallagher.
Quickly before I have to interrupt any questions, if we could keep the questions relative to that, less specific and more general about the ordinance and ensuring enforcement of the ordinance, just because I do anticipate there could be some litigation at some point relative to this. So I just want to just be careful about the questions, maybe a little more general than specific.
Understood. Thank you. Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked to have this put on. I know this initial ordinance was sponsored back in 2018 by Councilor Columbotus. But, you know, reading through the ordinance, you know, there is a fine component to this. And if there is any property in town that does not meet the standards that would lead to the enforcement of this ordinance, I think it's fair to say that if that daily fee is imposed but never paid, and any property that falls within this violation goes up for sale and is sold, that that would become sort of a lien as unpaid taxes would be on the property. Is that correct?
I could probably answer that, Mr. Dutton. So the way that it typically works when we do enforcement would be, first there would have to be the actual enforcement, then there would be the fine. As the fines accumulate, we would have to go into court and obtain judgment on the fines. So that judgment would then be enforced against, or could be enforced or levied against property or other things. But that's typically how we've done it in the past when we have an enforcement like that. It's not a municipal lien in the sense that it kind of goes on your municipal lien certificate and you say you owe X for taxes or Y. This is more of a litigation type court process to ascertain those fines, because obviously the owner has due process rights to object as well. So just so you have a sense of kind of how that plays out practically.
That's fine. And I think that it's important, you know, there's a lot of citizens in this town that work hard to clean up the town when we have town cleanups. You know, we have Music Alley is now reopened. We're going to have a big holiday, 4th of July event this weekend. I just think that, you know, we need to take a look at properties that are not that attractive and try to hold the owners accountable to try to make them look as presentable as possible while they figure out what they want to do with that particular property. And I'm glad to see that the McElwain is finally moving forward, and you know, that'll be an asset to the town as well. But that was the reason why I put that on there. I think there needs to be a reminder that we have this ordinance, and I think that it needs to be a little bit more enforced than it has been, to the best extent of the law that we can. Thank you.
Councilor Columbotus.
Was that, did you call on me, Mr. President?
Yeah, Councilor Columbotus, go ahead.
I would just like to echo the sentiment expressed by Mr. Gallagher that this, I really feel like this should be a really high priority. I think appearance does matter. If we're looking to redevelop the downtown and gussy it up, appearance matters, and you're not going to get private capital willing to invest in the community when they don't feel like they'll get a return on their capital by, you know, investing in a town that looks shabby. And I think this really should be a really high priority for the administration. So I urge that we perceive it as such. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Councilor George.
Thank you, through you, to the town manager. So I think my perspective on this is a little bit different. If we have any property that is in a high traffic area, both pedestrian and vehicle, that potentially poses a hazard to public safety, I would put that on the top of any priority list, regardless of how much building we have going on and things of that nature. And I know that there are specific rules to the road on that, but I think that from a practical perspective, if we had a particular property, a few lots that have been abandoned for decades, that from an outside perspective, look, I don't know the proper word to use. I would really like to see that put at the top of the priority list. And if we have to engage additional resources, I would do that as well. I'm not approaching this as it's blight and ugly. I'm not saying it's not. I'm looking at this as a potential public safety hazard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from any of the members of the council? Okay, seeing none.
So, Mr. President, I would only add one thing. I know Councilor Sousa had very patiently waited for an update on the facilities and maintenance. And I just want to let the council know that Chris Hartman, our director, is off this week, so he couldn't be here. But I think the blessing will be that he can do we'll put it on as a presentation with the president's consent at the next meeting, and he can give you a much more thorough report than simply me as part of the town manager's report. So I just want to let the council know that we have not forgotten that.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Sousa.
Thank you. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Discussions, re-precincting process. Marilee Hunt, our town clerk, is going to have a discussion with us. And Marilee, I don't know if this is any better than coming before Citizens Open Forum, having had to wait this long, but the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and through you to all the council. You know I have no problem being short, right? But I will also try to be understandable tonight. Josh, I think am I ready to share my screen?
Yep, you should be all set.
Okay, let's try this. I hope that's the one. Okay, so this evening I'm going to speak to you. I talked to you your last meeting about the fact that we're going to need to be re-precincting here in Bridgewater. There has been one pretty significant new development since that time a couple of weeks ago, and we've also had some other input from the state. So I will try to briefly take you through it here. We had a conference call with the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, that's Jolie Sprague Martin, and I. Our discussion included what you're going to see tonight. Their most optimistic division of 10 precincts could equal 5 districts. And that was given our current outdated census figure. They still do not have our census figure. We won't have that until September. So we're working with a figure that we know is too low, and we're doing the best to kind of think of what would be if we knew that real number. So the Secretary's office came up with a map for 5 districts. It's 10 precincts, 2 precincts in each district, and that would equal 5 district councilors. To that, you could add either 2 or 4 at-large councilors. That would give either 7 total councilors or 9 total councilors. These are things that are going to be up to the town council to decide. My personal input here is that at-large councilors ensure, we need them to ensure the uneven number of councilors, and at-large councilors draw voters. So the more at-large we have, the higher the turnout is. I'm not really lobbying for 9 over 7. I'm just saying what I think the reality is about voter turnout. So here's our current situation. We have these existing unknowns, which I've already mentioned, the 2020 Bridgewater census. We expect it in September. Here is the new twist that has been thrown to our process. Usually we do, the towns and cities do the apportioning of their precincts and then send it to the legislature, and the legislature apportions the legislative districts. That has changed. They are going to apportion the legislative districts first and then send it down to us. So our time clock has been pushed forward, I guess. We probably won't be doing anything until late October or November, but we will know the figures in September. So this is the first time that the legislators are defining their districts before we do. I've spoken with Representative D'Amelia. He assures me that he is working the best that he can to keep our district intact, making it Bridgewater and Rainham. But the Commonwealth faces the same potential situations that Bridgewater itself faces, which is one large growth area could bump it out of range with others and cause a domino effect, moving all the districts. So in other words, like I tried to explain the last time, if you have a district or a census block that's already high and it has grown in this last census year, it could grow out of proportion with the other things you're trying to package it with. And it could cause you to have to redistrict in ways that you would rather choose not to. I hope that makes sense to you. You can ask me at the end if you don't understand what that means. The distribution of Bridgewater's population will determine our number of possible precincts. As we spoke about the last time, the university may have grown. That could cause that very large census block to outweigh all the others. And then, as I said, a domino effect, making us rearrange everything in ways that we hadn't anticipated. Or some other areas of town may have grown disproportionately, and the same thing could happen with those. These are all the unknowns. And then the bottom line is no town or city can make a final determination until the legislature has finished its process. So what you're going to see next, first of all, you're going to see a map with 10 precincts. The precincts are and always must be population proportional. Precinct numbers, as you'll see them on the map, are optional. When the Commonwealth sent me the map, they're the ones who've drafted this map. When they sent it, they tried to keep the new precinct numbers as close as possible to the original numbers. In other words, if you were in District 6, they tried to keep you in District 6, or in 3, they tried to keep you in 3, but they've added 3 new precincts. So you'll see, it certainly isn't exact. It's the best they can do. And I want to tell you that the map may be confusing because currently we have the 7 precincts and districts, and those black lines are still on the working map. What is in color are the new precincts. So try to concentrate on colors and ignore the black lines if you can, but I will say it is difficult. The map, size, color, and boundary delineations make exact street identifications difficult or impossible. So even if you're blowing it up very big, you may not be able to see the exact streets that you might be interested in, for instance, your own street. And then I want to emphasize that this is not final. It's a potential hypothetical projection. That's as whatever, non-specific as I felt I could make it, of what might be possible should the census numbers not expand unevenly. And then the second thing you're going to see is a map with the 5 districts. That's combining 2 precincts in each district. So here we go. Here's our map of 10 precincts. You will note that every precinct has changed. And 3 of them, can you see my cursor? I don't know if you can. 3 of them, okay, 3 of them are new. 10, 9, and 8 are new. See the 7, which used to go all the way here, is not there, is not like that anymore. Those who know your precincts can see 6 is very different. 10 to this, 3. I'll just give you a little time to look at it. We can always come back to it and you'll have the presentation you can pull up after I'm done talking. You okay for me to move on?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this is the area of greatest change as far as I can see. I've tried to mark them. We've added precincts 9, 9, and 10. Reconfigured precinct 7. Reduced precinct 5. You see 9 comes down here. If you're not watching the black lines, you're watching 9 for that color. You see that 5 is this now. And you've changed 3 and 6 significantly. Everything is a relatively significant change. It's very different from what we've seen before. Our second area of change is adding precinct 8 and then the reconfiguration of precinct 7. Okay. And so here are the 5 potential districts. District 1, which is precincts 1 and 2. District 2, which, okay, so what I did here is I said District 2 is 9 and 6, which are here. We obviously could have either 2 or 4. That could either be 2 or 4, or this could be 2 or 4. For this one, we're saying that this is 2. District 3 is out here. It's a combination of 3 and 4. District 4 is 7 and 8. And District 5 is 5 and 10. So what's going to happen to the council when district numbers change? Everything's going to happen to the council. If there are 2 at-large councilors, which there will be at least 2, 1 seat will be retained until 2024. The existing at-large councilor seat for 2024, I believe it's Mr. Gallagher, will be retained. The other seat, which is already scheduled for election in 2020, will be up for election for another 3-year term. That's if you go with 7 councilors. With 4 at-large councilors, you can add 2 additional seats open for election in 2022. And I'm suggesting that potentially one of them would be for a 1-year term and the other would be for a 3-year term. And because you'd want them staggered. So then there would be 3-year positions elected every 2 years in a row. And then the next time there would be 3-year position elected every 3rd year. Does that make sense? Following me?
Yes.
Okay. All of the other seats, all the other council seats in this projection would be new precincts, because no current terms may be extended since all districts' voter content will be changed. So the examples, just to clarify that, is the new District 1 contains the old District 1 and the old District 2. So all voters in the new District 1 will need to vote for the District 1 council, and that will be from the new 1 and the new 2. So it has to be, District 1 council has to be revoted. Councilor has to be revoted. It'll be the same for all councilor positions. Example 2 is Districts 6 and 7 have disappeared. They no longer exist. Voters in those districts will have to vote for a councilor in their newly designated district. The things that we haven't done, there's been no discussion of town council terms, like who has served how many years and who has how much more time to serve or how all of any of that is going to work. We simply have not even touched that. I'm presuming that will be a town council decision made through adjustments to the administrative code. A ballot could potentially offer town council election choices comparable to those offered in the original town election in 2010, something like 2 positions for a 3-year term, 2 positions for a 2-year term, and 1 position for a 1-year term, so that you'd end up with all staggered terms again. Oops. No plan has yet been discussed to account for incumbency requirements of the town charter or the administrative code. And my suggestion to the council, because this is going to fall on your shoulders, is that in consultation with the town attorney, you should gather information defining best practices, rules, regulations, and legalities. And the decision should be, the final decision should be reserved until we have a final census number, an actual map, and a determination of the precincts and districts. So that is, again, not the end.
Thank you. Is that the end of the presentation?
It is the end of
Okay.
this time. I look at this like you're walking into the river, right? Last time you got your feet and toes wet. I think you're maybe about up to your ankles now. Before you know it, you're going to be up to your necks. And I just want you to be prepared for what's coming. So that's.
Well, we certainly appreciate all of the updates. And when we're looking at the charter review, you know, this is yet another thing that I'm hearing probably will end up in a workshop to try to figure out. But are you available for a few questions from council members?
Certainly.
Okay, Council Wood.
You know, over the years, we've talked about the small number of voters in 4 and 5. And we even considered joining precincts 4 and 5, and this kind of blows that all out of the water, right? But I looked at that earlier map, and it looks like 5 still encompasses a lot of the BSU campus.
It's entirely the BU campus.
Yeah, so how does that, so I guess we have to wait for the census numbers, but how does that fit? Because it doesn't seem like there's that many registered voters or people that actually sit in that area compared to the other areas of town.
It has nothing to do with voters. Precincts are not determined by voters. They're determined by population. And every precinct and every district must be population equitable, population proportional. So that's why when I explained last time how we have that huge census block at the university, which will probably grow and not shrink. That's why we can't divide into 14 precincts and have 7 districts, because we've got that one precinct block that is so large. It's about, as I remember, 2,856 people large. And so every other precinct would have to match that, and we don't have enough population to do that 14 times. So and the prison is the same thing. It's when you do precincts, it's a federal determination of census blocks, and we can't, it isn't supposed to be by voter. It isn't, it's supposed to be proportional in people. That's all I can say. That's because that's the truth. That's all I can say.
Any other questions from any members of the council? Well, I don't see any, but Marilee, I just wanted to add on to Councilor Wood's comments about the university. So to your knowledge, there's no caveat when you're dealing with university or college populations. And when you talk about the prison, I can sort of understand somewhat permanent residents, you know, accounting for our population. But when we look at the college, you know, a lot of them don't have permanent residency there. A vast majority are out of state and are voting out of state. How is it that as a small community, that there's nothing carved out that either puts a percentage on that population or excludes that population in terms of the numbers? Not them as people, certainly, but in terms of numbers. There's nothing that exists. It just doesn't seem right to me?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer for the federal government. Now the Census Bureau makes its determinations. I would say certain things like we have university students living all over Bridgewater, and there's certain areas where they're more concentrated there too in living areas, probably not nearly as concentrated as at the university. And when I think of the country and think of all the other universities, colleges, institutions around the country, I know that what the census tries to do is make everything equitable, so we're not carving out a group of people or any particular people who are being, we're not going to divide them up and make them gerrymander and put them in proportions where their group can't vote as a group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I understand.
So the census is very sensitive to that. And I don't know how they make all their decisions or if there is a way. Now, the town attorney did speak to us a little bit last time about the thought of trying to break up that census group. And that might be possible. What we heard back was that they would start that process in 2022, and it would be 2023 before that process could be implemented, if it could be implemented. So it's not going to help us for now.
All right, thank you.
That's the best I can say about that.
It's probably the federal government using the KISS principle, but I get it. Thank you. Any other questions? Any members of the council? Well, I guess yet again, Mary Lee, thank you so much for taking the time out tonight to sit through most of our meeting, to get to discussions and have this important conversation with us. And we look forward to keeping you on the agenda with any updates as they become available. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be back, and I would have been watching anyway. So this woke me up. Thank you.
Okay, moving on under discussions, item B, council clerk selection. I'm going to hand it off to Councilor Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had wanted to address the council briefly tonight to discuss the status of the work of the ad hoc committee to select a new town council clerk. I did report on behalf of the committee to the council at the last council meeting on June 8th, the results of our first meeting of the ad hoc committee. And we have subsequently held a second meeting, and I'll give you a little brief overview of the status of our work to this point. At our last meeting, we did approve a final form of a job description, which we benefited greatly from the input received from Ann Holmberg, and as well the tremendous support and input provided by Kimberly Williams, the assistant town manager. Her work was really indispensable both in advance of our second meeting and during our second meeting by having basically helped us to conform the job application to that which is the customary practice of the town of Bridgewater, to make sure that both stylistically and substantively the job description was entirely appropriate and accurate, and it would help us to locate the ideal candidates to fill that job. Kimberly did make us aware of the various resources available for publication of the application, or I should say publication of the job notice. And we took advantage of those with her help. We had a great discussion about the skills that we feel most important for a successful candidate in this role. And It's nothing that would sound unusual to any of you who weren't there. We were simply relying upon someone who would show a great understanding of the need for adherence to rules and to protocol. Someone perhaps who has experience in working with boards or similar agencies. Someone probably from a business background, although we certainly didn't rule out candidates with municipal experience, but we had to admit that there probably wouldn't be a tremendous input or interest from those persons at this point. And we also learned a great deal about implementing a blind process for screening candidates. And so accordingly, in conjunction with Kimberly's office, we did implement a process for soliciting applications and a process with the town human resources specialists for initial evaluation of those in order to assure that minimum requirements of the job were being met. So to date, we've actually now closed the period of what I'll call active acceptance of applications of interest from candidates. I know that in total, something in excess of 50 applicants did express interest in the town council clerk position. It was through the efforts of the town human resources professionals that that group has been winnowed down to a much more manageable number for purposes of our evaluation. And that's where we are. We three members of the committee, that is to say, councilors George and Souza and myself, have in our possession a pool of applicants. And we did begin some discussion at the ad hoc committee level of how we might propose going forward in terms of our role as an ad hoc committee and integrating that with the review process that we think is appropriate for the council overall. And so that's where we are. We are about to, you might say, score these applicants in our pool right now in terms of just a numeric kind of, numbering as to who we think our top three might be individually. And then we will, our plan is to meet once again as an ad hoc committee and see what commonality we have, determine whether we actually have some common selections among the top 3 or 4 candidates. Now, that really brings us to the point of bringing this matter back before the full council. And I've had some interaction just today with our town attorney, who's given me some guidance as to what he believes to be the most expeditious process and one which would, certainly be the safest process in terms of, certainly confidentiality issues and other important concerns. So one suggestion that I might have, if I may, and on this point, I will confess to you that our ad hoc committee has not had an opportunity to discuss this amongst ourselves yet. But one possibility would be for the ad hoc committee to review the pool of applicants, make our ideal choices individually, and to do that in an executive session meeting as an ad hoc committee. That is consistent with Attorney Rollins' suggestion. At that point, Attorney Rollins had proposed that what we might consider doing is to turn the matter over at that point to the full council for evaluation of a small number of candidates, the finalists, if you will. It might be 3 or 4 candidates, something of that sort. And for the council to interview those candidates in public session, which I was a little surprised to hear, but it could be the case that Attorney Rollins might care to expound upon that tonight. But that's just to give you a snapshot. That's where we are. We are moving forward, and I think as quickly as we can, given some of the limitations we face during this time of year. But we're trying to move this process along very quickly. And I wanted to give you this brief overview and follow up, and determine what questions might arise from the council on that basis. So I think we should engage in discussion, and if I may, Mr. President, use this opportunity to solicit questions from the council.
Absolutely, Councilor Chase. Councilor Columbotus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chase, you said there originally that you received 50 applications, right?
The town has, yes.
The town had, and that was winnowed down to how many?
I don't have the exact number. I want to say that it is under 15.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's 13.
You really, thank you, Counselor. 13. I'll go along with that.
And who did the winnowing? Who were the?
Well, that was done by the human resource professionals of the town,
mm-hmm.
who simply intended to employ their standard practices and to effectively make sure that minimal qualifications had been met in terms of the, we're not just talking about office skills, but we're talking about, for example, what we perceive as the ability of candidates to, rise to the position, to be in a position to advance in the role.
Right.
And certainly people who have shown a demonstrated ability with respect to their proficiency and their competence, their confidentiality. The kinds of, if they've had the kinds of roles, whether in government or in industry, that would show that those skills are developed to the point that we can rely upon their success.
Right.
Then they were determined to be appropriate candidates to move forward in the process.
Right. Was education level one of those criteria?
Without specifically, stating that, I certainly believe that to be the case. Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, Councilor Chase, I don't see any other questions from other members of the council, but certainly appreciate how quickly the process has been moving forward under your leadership on the subcommittee. I think it's totally appropriate to bring several candidates for the position into a public forum and interview them in that process. I just want to make sure that the town attorney and the Human Resources Department for the town has vetted the questions prior to them being brought in front of us. I think it's appropriate in many situations where you see department leaders being interviewed by either selectmen or city council as final candidates for that. So I think it's important that we do that openly in a public forum to have that transparency for the public to be involved in that process. So I look forward to you to continue to come back with updates, and I'm hopeful that we end up with a good candidate in the end.
As do I. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you would like, Mr. Rushton, just very briefly, so everyone has the context of how that works. So typically the ad hoc committee can even conduct interviews in executive session and review candidates and then make recommendations. But because you guys are a board that makes this selection, it falls under the open meeting law. So there will be a quorum of you that would be deliberating. So it has to happen in open meeting. It doesn't have to happen in subcommittee because it allows for executive session for some of this stuff to happen. So it's just the process. I know it does seem atypical, but it's the position that you all hire as opposed to the town manager. That's why the process looks a little bit different, just so you know contextually.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Committee reports. Are there any committee reports this evening? Not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to move on to legislation for action. First item is Order 0 FY 21-048, acceptance of a gift, Bridgewater Police Association. At their meeting held on 6/14/21, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to recommend approval at their meeting on 6/7/21. This measure may be finally voted this evening. A motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, have a second.
Second.
Any discussions? Okay, seeing none, I'll move for a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Moving on, item B, Order 0 FY 21-049, acceptance of a grant, Home Depot Foundation. At their meeting held on 6/14/21, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to recommend approval at their meeting held on 6/7/21. This measure may be finally voted this evening. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, move for roll call vote.
Mr. President, I'll just say,
Council Wood.
just a second to thank Home Depot and also I should have thanked the Police Association for the gift last time. Gifts and grants are, make various things possible, and we thank the people that do that. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. We'll move to roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
So moving on, item C, Order 0 FY 21-050, end of year transfers. At their meeting held on 6/14/21, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. Finance Committee met tonight on 6/29/21. This disposition will be provided by the town manager. This measure may be finally voted this evening. I'll refer to the town manager for their vote this evening.
Mr. President, they voted unanimously 5-0 to approve the transfers.
Excellent, thank you. Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, move for Council Wood.
I just say, when we met, it was a typical year-end transfers, a couple questions, no big surprises. This happens every year. Hopefully everyone will agree. Thanks.
Thank you. Move for roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Item D, Order 0 FY 21-052, Supportive Diversity and Equity Inclusion Committee. At the meeting held on 6/14/21, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee met tonight, 6/29/21. This disposition will be provided by the town manager, and this measure may be finally voted this evening pending the outcome. Move to the town manager.
Mr. President, the Finance Committee approved this transfer by a vote of 4-1.
4-1. Okay, excellent. Motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, any
Second.
discussion?
No.
Council Moore.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say I'm excited about hearing this. I think even with public comment earlier, it's clearly important. And just a general note, if we are bringing this training into the town, it would be great if maybe the council and some other committees had access to it too. Don't know if that's an option, but wanted to open it up for consideration. Thanks.
Council Morris, I apologize. I missed your request.
So outside of this, as a follow-up, if we are purchasing training for DE&I with this funds, if that training could be made available to the town, other committees, the council, etc.
Absolutely, great idea. Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, move for roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. Item E, Order 0 FY 21-053, Transfer Order, Water Main Curve Street Project. At their meeting held on 6/14/21, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee met tonight, 6/29/21. The disposition will be provided by the town manager. This measure may be finally voted this evening, pending the disposition. I'll leave it to Michael.
Mr. President, the Finance Committee voted 5-0 in favor of the transfer.
Excellent, thank you. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Excellent, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, move for roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. Next item, item F, Order 0 FY 21-055, Emergency Measure, Grant of Conservation Restriction to Wildlands Trust. First step in this is I'll entertain a motion to accept an emergency preamble.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, excellent. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, move to a roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Town Manager for an explanation.
Mr. President, thank you. This is, I believe, the first emergency measure that we've ever had in my tenure, and it is necessitated by the fact that we have to get all our documents in to the state by the end of the fiscal year, which is tomorrow, in order to make sure that we receive our reimbursement for the Stiles and Hart purchase that we did a little over a year ago. And that is really the only reason for this. It certainly not an emergency in the common sense, but certainly an emergency because we want to preserve our opportunity to get that reimbursement of, I believe it was almost $350,000. So that is the reason for this. There was some changes, as the explanation notes, at the EOEEA office, and a new person came on and said that we needed to not just sign the paperwork, we had to get a vote of the town council. So that's why this is in front of you tonight. But I'm certainly happy to answer a question.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for the Town Manager? Okay, seeing none, motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. Any questions? Seeing none, move for a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Moving on. Letter M, old business, we have none. Letter N, new business. First item A, ordinance D FY 21-010, zoning ordinance, zoning map amendment, 96 Main Street. I'll defer to Council Souza.
Yes, what happened when they did the rezoning of the downtown, okay, the lot in question, they drew the line right through the property and split it. So now the owner wants to tear down the building and put a building in front for mixed use, but use the property behind for the parking lot. We can't use it as a parking lot because it's still zone residential. And all we're asking here is to turn the entire, add the back property into the front property for the same zoning so that they can build this building and have a parking lot.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions from any town councilors? Council Columbotus.
Through,
Oh, you just shut yourself mute.
I'm sorry, through you to the town attorney, would this be considered spot zoning in as much as it just deals with one parcel?
Well, it's a good question. I haven't fully reviewed the zoning, though I know it's just on for first reading today, so certainly I can report that to the committee if it gets referred out. But if it has some other practical purpose other than to simply zone one building for the benefit of that building, then it would not be spot zoning. So sometimes you may zone one particular parcel because it should have been part of a business district before, or it should have been part of a residential district before. And in that context, it's not particularly spot zoning. I don't have enough of the factual information because it's only on for first reading, but if those are the facts, it could conceivably be. If it's not, and it's simply because the way the lines were particularly drawn don't really suit what the intention of the original zoning was, then it wouldn't be spot zoning. So it's just a factual distinction. I don't have all the specific facts of this zoning, but I certainly can report that to whatever committee it gets referred out to if they want to reach out to me.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion to refer to Community Economic Development Committee and the Planning Board.
So moved.
Second. Okay. I expect no comments, but any additional comments? Seeing none, I'll move for roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, Mr. Wood,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Okay, next item, item B, ordinance D FY 21-011, general ordinance. Amend Article 2, Section 2-1 of the Town Charter. I'll defer to Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my colleagues here, what I'm trying to do here and in ordinance 12 is to put the charter language and the administrative code language, which is the same, into the hands of the Rules and Procedures Committee. So we can get ready based on the town clerk's report tonight to be ready to make a recommendation to the council. Eventually, it'll be our decision as to how many councilors and how many districts we have. So what I'd like to send to the Rules and Procedures Committee is the same language that's in there, but I'm taking out all the numbers and have the discussion in the Rules and Procedures Committee or another workshop where we can discuss what we want to do based on the numbers that come in September. Now, I don't think it's too early to start having some of those discussions because remember, we only meet once in July and once in August, and September comes pretty fast. And I would hate to see us under the gun. So I think if this language, if these two ordinances can at least get put in committee, that committee can start having discussions or refer it to all of us for more workshop sessions to determine, what do you all think? If it does come to 10 precincts, do we want, 5 and 4? Do we want a 5 and 2, or what? So I think that that's the purpose of this, is to get the language in the rules and procedures. That's where it's going to go anyway, so we can begin the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Council Wood.
I just have one, if I could ask you, through you to the town attorney. And I understand what Councilor Gallagher's intention, put it out there so we can start discussing it. But I'm wondering if during the process, we have to have it in a different form, because my understanding is we as a body won't be able to vote on reconstituting our body. It needs to go up to the state for action. So I'm just wondering about format of the item here, if we need to take a look at approach, or maybe the committee does that. I don't know, but can we hear from?
Yeah, I thought about this. I did see Councilor Gallagher's proposal. I don't think there's anything improper about this proposal being submitted or sent out to a committee to start the process of the change in the admin code. Obviously, that's going to have to line up with whatever charter change we end up making. But I think this at least keeps the ordinance part of the process, and it's a belt and suspenders approach. So I have no issue with it. I understand, obviously, there's some vagueness to it at this stage because we don't know the full extent of what will be there. If this were coming to you for a vote today, obviously I'd probably have a different perspective, but I think the intent makes sense. And I think we're lining it up or starting the process of redistricting or re-precincting, which is going to be probably your priority sometime in the fall. So it's good to at least have this out there for first reading and in a committee so that it can come back relatively quickly after we get the things done with the state legislature. So I think it's fine in its current form with the stage of the process that it's at.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I would certainly agree that we need to get something moving in committee, and we can adjust and adapt as we get more information. But I would certainly entertain a motion to refer it to the Rules and Procedures Committee.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Move to a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Okay, moving on, item C, ordinance D, FY 21-012, general ordinance, admin code change part 2, chapter 1, article 2, section 2. Defer to Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you. And this is the sister language, if you will, of the charters. This is the admin code change that mirrors the charter change. So they kind of go together.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the council? Okay, entertain a motion to refer to the Rules and Procedures Committee.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Move to a roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Moving on, item D, order 0 FY 21-054, acceptance of federal funds, ARPA, CLFRF funds. To defer to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is very simply the similar to any gift or grant acceptance. The ARPA funds that we have been designated amount to $2,890,000 $842. And so requires council acceptance of that. And we will be getting more guidance from the federal government, certainly through the state and county as well, on the appropriate ways to spend this money. Right now, we tentatively have it earmarked for a lot of it for offsetting some of our wastewater and water project funding. So, but that obviously the council will decide where it gets spent, but that requires first off an acceptance.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to refer to the Budget, Finance, and the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, entertain a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Moving on to item E, Order 0 FY21-056, Contract Ratification, Local 1700, ASME, Council 93. Defer to the Town Manager.
Mr. President, the Council 93 of AFSCME and the town management have agreed to a memo of understanding, letter of understanding for a new contract. And we believe that the terms are quite satisfactory, good for certainly the town and good for the employee. And we would encourage the referral to Budget and Finance Committee.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, entertain a motion. I'm sorry, was there a question or comment?
I was just making the motion to move it to the Budget, Finance, and Finance Committee.
Excellent, we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Move for a roll call vote.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Oh.
That's germane to this. At one point, the council had a personnel committee, and I don't know if that's still a standing committee. Does anyone have insight onto that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Personally, I don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item O, citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens here wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak during citizens' comments?
Good evening again, everyone.
Good evening.
This is Rigobert Noel again. I just want to echo, well, not echo, I just want to say thank you so much for the earlier vote with respect to the diversity, equity, inclusion. Council Moore, I believe, made a suggestion, which I simply want to just highlight that in our conversation as an ad hoc committee, we believe that the training should be made available and will be made available to town leadership across the board. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any other citizens for citizens' comments? Josh, do you see anyone? I don't
do
on
not.
my end. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see Carlton Hunt with his hand raised.
Oh, okay. Dr. Hunt.
Can't hear you.
No sound, Dr. Hunt.
No,
Okay, we'll move on and see if he can pop in with sound. Just check to see if there's any other citizens for citizens' comments. I do not see any. I'll give Dr. Hunt one last chance. Dr. Hunt, you able to hear us? No, technology's going to fail us tonight. I apologize. We're going to move on to executive session. We have none. We're going to move to, council comments. I'm going to start with Councilor George.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. President.
No worries.
Really, the only thing I have to say is very much looking forward to July 4th festivities. I don't think I can say thank you enough to the July 4th committee. They did a remarkable job in a very short period of time, securing everything that they needed for the parade, for the fireworks, fundraising, coordination, when the vast majority of cities and towns around us have postponed it till the following year. They've followed through. I know there's some other festivities as well. So I hope everyone enjoys it. And I hope that also while people are enjoying it, they seriously consider early on donating to the July 4th committee, because when they start, technically they start their fundraising on July 5th. So I know that they would really like to go into the season fully funded and just really concentrate on putting on the best July 4th festivities that they can have. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gallagher.
thank you, Mr. President. I'm looking forward to seeing all my colleagues Sunday morning at 10 o'clock so we can march in the 4th of July parade. I've already got my T-shirt ready to go. I'm looking forward to the day and the fireworks at night. And again, thanks to the hard work for the past couple years of the 4th of July committee and the hard work they do every year in raising funds and putting all this together. It should be a great celebratory day for the town. If while we are in the middle of this heat wave, hope everybody stays hydrated and stays safe and doesn't overdo it. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Perry's not in attendance, so Councilor Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just echo that sentiment expressed by Councilor Gallagher. I intend to join the parade, and I certainly hope that there's a large turnout for that. I hope the weather holds up for us. It'll certainly be cooler according to the forecast. In any event, I'm sure that it'll be a wonderful time, and I'll just make my annual request that people please refrain from use of their own fireworks to celebrate the 4th, and instead rely upon the great efforts of the 4th of July committee of our town for that purpose. It's much safer and much more enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Souza.
I'd like to just echo the comments made by the previous members about the parade, and I'm looking forward to being there Sunday morning. Tomorrow morning, I will know if I have my T-shirt or not. If not, I'll be there anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Souza. Councilor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to thank everyone who participated in public comment tonight. Appreciate the input. Also wanted to thank everyone who presented tonight. I know that a lot of hard work happened behind the scenes, and the presentation is the culmination of many hours, so appreciate that work. Lastly, had a great time at the Juneteenth event, and really look forward to the July 4th event. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. Councilor Wood.
Thank you. Like everyone else, I'll thank the committee, the July 4th committee. It's a very small group doing a tremendous amount of work. There's been messaging on Facebook There's signs in people's lawns about the fundraising. I have one in my front yard. And they do, you know, as probably Lisa's front lawn maybe less than 2 months ago, and it was iffy if this was even going to happen. This is what defines Bridgewater for me. I say this every year. It's a small town feel. We get the parade. It's the only time of year you can walk down the middle of Route 18 and not be afraid of getting hit. It's, you know, the parade always has a great turnout. The fireworks are always spectacular. It's well organized. If there are any bumps in the road, they're well hidden. And I will repeat what has often been said. The town of Bridgewater does not fund fireworks. And that comes from the contributions of the people around town and others that make it happen. And the volunteers pull it all together. So I want to just extend my thanks to the volunteers for doing a tremendous job this year. Thank you.
So thank you, Councilor Wood. Councilor Columbotus.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll just be brief, echoing the sentiments of all the councilors for the 4th of July committee. I did just want to take a second just to recognize the hard work of both police and fire, who, although all of us will be largely off and celebrating a good day, they'll all have to work those events in a rather long day, from very early morning parade routes to safety and security for the fireworks. And I think it'll be particularly busy this year, as many of the towns around us have canceled. I would expect to see, you know, quite a bit of people in town for the July 4th celebration. So with that, that's all I have. I would certainly, excuse me, I should mention executive session. We have none. And then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Okay, move for a roll call vote.
Mr. Columbotus. Do you leave already? Oh, there he is. Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. 8 in favor, 0 against. Meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Have a great
All right,
evening.
thank you.
See you Sunday.
Yes.